The train whistle pierced the tranquil Montana afternoon as Amelia Hawkins clutched her worn leather suitcase with trembling hands. Her heart raced with each mile closer to Willow Creek, a dusty frontier town that held her uncertain future. The year was 1885, and at 22, she had taken the most desperate gamble of her life, answering an advertisement for a mail-order bride to a man she'd never met, in a land she'd never seen. The wooden bench beneath her creaked as the train rounded the final bend. Through the window, the vast expanse of golden prairie stretched to meet the endless blue sky. She smoothed her simple blue dress, the nicest one she owned, and touched the locket at her throat, the last remnant of her mother. Next stop, Willow Creek. The conductor called, swaying down the narrow aisle. Amelia gathered her meager belongings. Back in Boston, there had been nothing left for her after the fire claimed her parents and their modest tailoring shop. The debts that followed consumed what little remained. The advertisement in the matrimonial news had seemed like divine providence. Rancher seeks bride of good character. Comfortable home provided. V. Armstrong, Willow Creek, Montana Territory. His letters had been straightforward but kind, describing his cattle ranch and the small but growing town. He'd sent train fare and promised a respectable life. It was more than she could hope for in Boston, where unmarried women her age with no family connections faced grim prospects. The train lurched to a stop, and Amelia's stomach nodded. This was it. She stepped onto the platform, squinting in the harsh sunlight. The station was little more than a wooden platform with a small building. A handful of people milled about, but none approached her. She scanned the faces, searching for the tall, broad-shouldered man Victor had described himself to be in his letters. Minutes passed. The other passengers dispersed, collected by family or friends, until Amelia stood alone, her suitcase at her feet. "You must be Miss Hawkins," came a gravelly voice behind her. She turned to find an elderly man with a silver-streaked beard. "I am," she replied, unable to mask her disappointment. "Name's Walter. I run the general store. Victor asked me to fetch you." He got held up at the ranch trouble with some rustlers. The old man's eyes were kind as he reached for her suitcase. "His foreman should be in town tomorrow to collect you." "Tomorrow?" Amelia's voice faltered. "Don't you worry. My wife's got a room ready for you above the store. It ain't much, but it's clean." As they walked down the town's main street, Amelia felt eyes upon her. Women paused their conversations to stare. Men turned from the saloon entrance to watch her pass. Walter seemed oblivious to the attention, pointing out the handful of establishments that made up Willow Creek: the general store, saloon, small church, sheriff's office. "Is that her?" A woman's sharp voice carried across the street. "Armstrong's mail-order bride." "Paid good money for that one, I reckon," came another voice, followed by snickering. Amelia kept her gaze forward, chin lifted, though her cheeks burned. She'd expected curiosity, but not the naked disdain in their tones. Walter led her to a 2-story clapboard building with Willow Creek Mercantile painted across the front. Inside, shelves lined the walls stocked with everything from canned goods to tools, fabrics to ammunition. "Martha," Walter called. "She's here." A plump woman with gray streaked hair emerged from the back room, wiping flour-covered hands on her apron. Her expression was difficult to read as she assessed Amelia. "Welcome to Willow Creek," Martha said, not unkindly but with reservation. "I've got your room ready upstairs. It's small, but you'll only need it for the night." "Thank you for your hospitality," Amelia replied, trying to summon a smile. Martha nodded curtly. "Supper's at 6. Walter will show you upstairs." The room was indeed small, just enough space for a narrow bed, a washstand with a cracked mirror, and a hook for her clothes. But it was clean, as promised, with fresh linens and a small window overlooking the main street. Alone at last, Amelia sank onto the bed, the reality of her situation crashing over her. She was thousands of miles from anything familiar, in a town that already seemed hostile, waiting to marry a stranger who hadn't even bothered to meet her train. At supper, Martha's demeanor thawed slightly as she served a hearty stew and cornbread. "Victor Armstrong is a good man," she said abruptly, as if reading Amelia's thoughts. "Keeps to himself mostly, but fair in his dealings. You've known him long." Amelia asked, grateful for any information about her future husband. Since he came here 5 years back, bought the Lazia ranch when old man Peterson died, works harder than any two men, built that place up from nearly nothing. Martha hesitated. But folks here, they've got ideas about women who come out this way to marry men they've never met. I gathered that from the welcome I received, Amelia said quietly. Martha looked uncomfortable. They'll come around once they know you. It's just, there've been others before. Others. Mail order brides. 3 came to Willow Creek in the past 2 years. None stayed more than a month. Amelia's spoon paused halfway to her mouth. What happened to them? First one ran off with a traveling salesman. Second couldn't handle the isolation, went back east. Third. Martha exchanged glances with Walter. Well, Clyde Mercer wasn't the man he presented himself to be in those letters. That poor girl fled in the night. I see, Amelia whispered, appetite vanishing. Victor's different, Walter interjected. Honest man, just not one for social niceties. After supper, Amelia retreated to her room, unpacking her few possessions: 2 dresses, undergarments, a hairbrush, her mother's Bible. She tried to imagine Victor Armstrong's face, to picture their first meeting, but anxiety clouded her thoughts. Sleep came fitfully, filled with dreams of being lost on endless plains. She woke to roosters crowing and the sounds of a town coming to life. After washing her face and pinning her chestnut hair into a neat bun, she put on her second-best dress, a sage green cotton that brought out the flecks of gold in her hazel eyes. Martha provided a breakfast of flapjacks and coffee. You can wait in the store, she said. Jackson should be by before noon. Jackson, Victor's foreman, good man, half-Crow Indian, been with Victor since the beginning. Amelia spent the morning helping in the store, grateful for the distraction. She was arranging a display of fabric when the bell above the door jingled. A group of women entered, their conversation halting when they spotted her. So you're Victor Armstrong's mail-order bride, said the tallest woman, her tone making the words sound dirty. She was expensively dressed with a hat adorned with ostrich feathers. I'm Margaret Thornton. My husband owns the bank. Amelia Hawkins, she replied steadily. Pleased to meet you. The women exchanged glances, making no attempt to hide their amusement. How much did he pay for you, dear? Asked another woman, her smile vicious. Amelia felt heat rise to her face. Mr. Armstrong and I have an arrangement based on mutual respect and shared goals, she managed to say. Is that what they're calling it now? Margaret laughed. Well, I hope you're made of sturdier stuff than the others, though I wouldn't get too comfortable at the Lazia. Victor Armstrong may be the richest rancher in the county, but he's got the disposition of a wounded bear. Last bride barely unpacked before she was running back east. I'm not easily frightened, Mrs. Thornton, Amelia replied, though her heart pounded. We'll see about that, Margaret said, turning to her companions. Let's go, ladies. We've seen what we came to see. As they left, Amelia heard one say, Poor thing, she has no idea what she's in for. Walter, who had witnessed the exchange, gave her a sympathetic look. Don't mind them. They treat anyone new like this. It's all right, Amelia said, though it wasn't. I'm used to people making judgments. Just before noon, the store door opened again, and a tall man entered. He removed his hat, revealing copper-toned skin and black hair pulled back with a leather cord. His face was weathered but handsome, with sharp cheekbones and dark, assessing eyes. Miss Hawkins, he asked, his voice deep and steady. Yes, she answered, wiping suddenly sweaty palms on her skirt. I'm Jackson Blackfeather, foreman at the Lazia. I've come to take you to the ranch. His expression revealed nothing of his thoughts. I'm ready, she said, though it was far from the truth. After gathering her suitcase and thanking the Walters for their hospitality, Amelia followed Jackson outside where a wagon waited. He helped her up onto the wooden seat with efficient, impersonal hands. As they pulled away from town, Amelia felt the stares following them. Will it be a long journey? She asked, desperate to break the silence. About 2 hours, Jackson replied. Ranch is 15 miles out. The wagon rumbled down the dusty road, leaving Willow Creek behind. Amelia's thoughts turned to Victor Armstrong. Is Mr. Armstrong at the ranch now? Jackson's expression shifted slightly. He's there. Something in his tone made her stomach clench. Is everything all right? Jackson hesitated. Victor was thrown from his horse yesterday while chasing rustlers. He's banged up some, but he'll heal. Is he badly hurt? Alarm sharpened her voice. Broken arm, bruised ribs. Doc Reynolds set the arm. He's moving around, just in pain and not in the best of moods. Jackson gave her a sideways glance. Thought you should know before we arrive. Amelia tried to process this information. Her future husband was injured, in pain, and by all accounts, not the most pleasant man even in good health. Thank you for telling me, she said quietly. They rode in silence for a while, the landscape opening up around them, rolling hills covered in prairie grass, dotted with wildflowers. In the distance, mountains rose, their peaks still capped with snow even in early summer. It's beautiful country, Amelia said softly. Jackson nodded. Different from where you're from, very. Boston is all buildings and narrow streets, people everywhere. This feels endless. Some find that frightening, he observed. Perhaps, she admitted. But there's something freeing about it too. Jackson gave her a considering look, as if reassessing her. The Lazy sits in a valley just ahead. Good water, sheltered from the worst winter storms. Victor chose well when he bought it. As they crested a hill, Amelia got her first glimpse of what would be her new home. The ranch spread across a lush valley, a large two-story house commanding the center, surrounded by barns, corrals, and outbuildings. Cattle dotted the distant pastures, and a stream wound through the property, reflecting the sunlight. It's larger than I expected, she said, surprise evident in her voice. Victor's built it up over the years, started with just the small cabin that's now the bunkhouse, built the main house himself with help. As they approached, Amelia saw men working around the property mending fences, moving cattle, carrying supplies. They paused to watch the wagon pass, curiosity evident on their faces. Jackson pulled the wagon to a stop before the main house. It was an impressive structure of logs and timber, with a wide porch wrapping around the front. Smoke curled from the stone chimney despite the warm day. Wait here, Jackson said, jumping down from the wagon. He disappeared inside the house, leaving Amelia to sit anxiously, aware of the covert glances from the ranch hands. When the door opened again, Jackson emerged, followed by a tall man with a splinted left arm bound to his chest. Victor Armstrong moved with the careful deliberation of someone in pain, his jaw clenched tight. His face was all hard angles, tanned from the sun, with a strong brow and a straight nose that might once have been broken. A week's worth of beard shadowed his jaw, and his dark blonde hair fell carelessly across his forehead. But it was his eyes that captured Amelia's attention, a startling blue, like a summer sky, currently narrowed against the sunlight or perhaps pain. Those eyes assessed her now, giving nothing away. Jackson helped her down from the wagon. Up close, Victor Armstrong was even more imposing, standing well over 6 feet. Amelia, who considered herself tall for a woman, had to tilt her head back to meet his gaze. "Mr. Armstrong," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Amelia Hawkins." Victor looked at her offered hand for a moment before taking it briefly in his right one. His palm was calloused, his grip firm but not crushing. "Miss Hawkins," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Welcome to the Lazy A." There was an awkward silence. Amelia waited for him to say more, perhaps express pleasure at her arrival or comment on her appearance. Instead, he turned toward the house. "You must be tired from the journey. Come inside." Amelia followed him up the porch steps, Jackson behind them with her suitcase. Inside, the house was surprisingly comfortable, polished wooden floors covered with woven rugs, sturdy furniture built for function, but not without care. A large stone fireplace dominated the main room, a low fire burning despite the warm day. "Rosa," Victor called, and a plump Mexican woman appeared from what Amelia assumed was the kitchen. "This is Miss Hawkins. Show her to her room, please." With that, he nodded curtly to Amelia and walked away, disappearing down a hallway. Jackson set down her suitcase and with a sympathetic glance left the house. "Come, señorita," Rosa said kindly. "I show you your room. You must be tired, yes." Amelia followed her up a staircase to the second floor. The house was larger than it appeared from outside, with a central hallway and several doors leading off it. Rosa opened one near the end. "This is your room," she said. "Bathroom is down hall. I put fresh water for washing. The room was spacious and pleasantly furnished with a large bed covered in a colorful quilt, a chest of drawers, a small writing desk near the window, and a rocking chair in the corner. The window overlooked the valley with mountains visible in the distance. "It's lovely," Amelia said sincerely. "Thank you, Rosa. Senor Victor, he fixed this room special when he know you coming," Rosa said with a small smile. "Many weeks he work on it, even with ranch keeping him busy." This information surprised Amelia. The gruff man downstairs didn't seem the type to concern himself with such details. "Dinner is at 6, Rosa continued. "Rest now. Long journey, yes." After Rosa left, Amelia sat on the edge of the bed, trying to make sense of her new reality. The ranch was impressive, far exceeding her expectations. The house was comfortable, her room pleasant. But Victor Armstrong was nothing like the man whose letters had given her hope. He'd barely looked at her, barely spoken. Was he disappointed in her appearance, regretting his decision to send for a bride? She unpacked her few belongings, washed her face in the basin of cool water, and changed into her everyday dress. Looking out the window at the sprawling ranch below, she felt a mix of awe and apprehension. This was to be her home now, but would she ever belong here? At 6 o'clock, Amelia made her way downstairs, following the scent of cooking food. She found the dining room off the main living area. Victor was already seated at the head of a long oak table, his expression tense as he struggled to cut a piece of meat one-handed. "May I help?" Amelia asked, stepping forward before she could reconsider. Victor looked up, surprise flickering across his features. For a moment, she thought he would refuse, pride winning out over practicality. Then he set down his knife with a sigh. "Thank you," he said gruffly. She took the seat beside him, cutting the roast beef into manageable pieces. "Is that better?" he nodded, avoiding her eyes. "Rosa is a good cook, but she doesn't always consider how difficult some foods are to eat one-handed. How long will your arm need to heal?" Amelia asked, serving herself from the platters on the table. "Doc says 6 weeks at least," Victor replied, his frustration evident. "Bad timing with calving season and the summer drive coming." "I'm sorry about your injury. Your foreman mentioned rustlers," Victor's expression darkened. "3 men trying to run off a dozen head of my best cattle. We caught them, but in the chase my horse stepped in a prairie dog hole, went down hard." "That sounds frightening," Amelia said sincerely. Victor shrugged, then winced at the movement. "Hazard of ranching." "Not the first time I've been thrown, won't be the last." He looked at her directly for the first time. "I'm sorry I couldn't meet you at the train. It wasn't how I planned your arrival." "There's no need to apologize," Amelia assured him. "I understand." They ate in silence for a few moments. Amelia searched for something to say, some way to bridge the awkwardness between them. "Your ranch is beautiful," she ventured. "Much larger than I imagined from your letters." A hint of pride crossed his face. "Started with just 50 acres and 30 head of cattle. Now it's 5,000 acres and nearly 1,000 head." He hesitated. "I know it's different from Boston." "I'm glad it's different," Amelia said honestly. "There was nothing left for me there." Victor studied her, those blue eyes uncomfortably perceptive. "You said in your letters your parents died in a fire." "Yes, our home was above their tailor shop. The fire started in the workshop below something with the stove, they think. I was staying with a friend that night." She swallowed hard. "They didn't suffer," the fire marshal said. "The smoke would have taken them before the flames." "I'm sorry," Victor said, and she believed he meant it. "Losing family is hard." "You mentioned your parents passed when you were young," Amelia remembered from his letters. "Cholera, I was 16. Went to live with my uncle's family in Kansas until I turned 18, then headed west to make my own way." There was more to the story, Amelia sensed, but she didn't press. They finished the meal with sporadic conversation about the ranch and Amelia's journey west. As Rosa cleared the dishes, Victor cleared his throat. "Miss Hawkins, Amelia, I know this isn't an ideal situation. My injury, I mean, and I know the town gave you a cold welcome. They're not kind to outsiders, especially mail-order brides." "I can handle a few unkind words, Mr. Armstrong," she replied. "Victor," he corrected. "If we're to be married, you should use my given name." "Victor," she repeated, the name feeling strange on her tongue. "When had you thought the wedding would take place?" He shifted uncomfortably. I'd planned for this Sunday if that suits you. Pastor Evans comes out from town once a month and he'll be here. But if you need more time, Sunday is fine, Amelia interrupted, surprising herself with her certainty. What was the point in delaying? She had come to be his wife. A few more days wouldn't change that. Victor looked relieved. Good, that's good. He stood carefully, mindful of his injuries. If you'll excuse me, I need to check on some matters with Jackson before turning in. Rosa will see to anything you need. After he left, Amelia helped Rosa with the dishes despite the older woman's protests. Señor Victor, he is good man, Rosa told her as they worked. Not always good with words, but good heart. How long have you worked for him? Amelia asked. 5 years, since he buy ranch. My husband Felipe works as cook for the ranch hands. Our son Miguel works with horses. Pride filled her voice. Before we work for ranch in Texas. Bad place. Señor Victor, he pay fair, treat people with respect. This glimpse into Victor's character comforted Amelia. Perhaps there was more to the taciturn rancher than his gruff exterior suggested. That night, lying in her new bed, Amelia tried to imagine her future as Mrs. Victor Armstrong. The ranch was beautiful, the house comfortable. Victor himself was not what she'd expected, less forthcoming than his letters had suggested, more reserved but not unkind. She could make a life here, she decided. Perhaps even a good one. The next few days passed in a blur of activity as Amelia settled into life at the Lazier. Victor was often absent, overseeing ranch operations despite his injury, returning to the house exhausted and in pain. When present, he was polite but distant, answering her questions but rarely initiating conversation. Rosa became Amelia's guide and ally, showing her around the house, explaining how things were run. Amelia insisted on helping with household chores, wanting to feel useful and to learn the rhythms of her new home. On the third day, Amelia was hanging laundry in the yard when she heard the sound of approaching horses. 4 women from town, including Margaret Thornton, rode up to the house, their expressions a mix of curiosity and something less pleasant. Mrs. Thornton, Amelia greeted them, smoothing her work apron. What a surprise. We thought we'd pay a neighborly call, Margaret said, her smile not reaching her eyes. See how you're settling in. The women dismounted, and Amelia had no choice but to invite them inside. She served coffee while they inspected the house with critical eyes. Victor's done well for himself, commented a woman who introduced herself as Harriet Jenkins. When he first came, people said he'd never last a winter. Yet here he is with the largest ranch in the county, added another, Clara Miller. And now a bride to complete the picture. Their smiles were sharp, their eyes calculating. Amelia felt like a specimen under examination. Tell us, Miss Hawkins, Margaret said, setting down her cup. What skills do you bring to this marriage? Do you know anything about ranching? I'm a quick learner, Amelia replied evenly, and I was raised to run a household efficiently. A household in Boston is quite different from a ranch in Montana, Clara observed. Winters here can kill the unprepared. Isolation drives some women mad. I'm not easily frightened by challenges, Mrs. Miller, Margaret leaned forward. Did Victor tell you about his last bride, the one who came 3 years ago? Amelia tensed. No, he didn't mention any previous arrangements. Eleanor was her name, pretty little thing from Philadelphia. Lasted 6 weeks before she fled back east, claiming Victor was cold as ice and twice as hard to crack. Margaret's eyes gleamed with malice. Said he'd barely spoken 20 words to her the entire time. Perhaps she didn't listen closely enough, Amelia replied coolly. The women exchanged glances. You've got spirit, I'll give you that, Margaret said. But spirit isn't enough out here. It takes a special kind of woman to handle a man like Victor Armstrong. Cold, distant, driven, he cares more for this ranch than he ever will for a wife. Before Amelia could respond, the front door opened and Victor entered, stopping short at the sight of the women. Ladies, he said, removing his hat. This is unexpected. Just paying a call on your bride-to-be, Victor, Margaret explained, her tone suddenly honeyed, making her feel welcome. Victor's eyes found Amelia's, a question in them. She gave him a slight smile, hoping to convey that she was handling the situation. That's kind of you, he said, though his tone suggested he thought it was anything but I'm afraid I need to borrow Miss Hawkins. Ranch business. The women had little choice but to take their leave. As they departed, Margaret turned to Amelia. "Do join us for the social at the church next week. We'd love to welcome you properly to Willow Creek." When they were gone, Victor turned to Amelia. "I'm sorry about that. I should have warned you they might come snooping." "It's all right," Amelia assured him. "They were just curious." "They were testing you," Victor corrected, "seeing if they could frighten you off." He hesitated. "What did they tell you?" Amelia considered lying, then decided against it. "They mentioned someone named Alina, a previous bride." Victor's expression closed off. "Yes, it didn't work out." "Why didn't you mention her in your letters?" He looked away. "Didn't seem relevant. It was a mistake, one I'd rather not revisit." "I see." Amelia waited for him to elaborate, but he remained silent. "Were there others, as the townspeople suggest?" Victor's jaw tightened. "No, just Alina." He met her gaze directly. "I should have told you, I apologize for that, but it has no bearing on our arrangement." "Doesn't it?" Amelia challenged. "If this Alina left because you were, how did Mrs. Thornton put it, cold as ice and twice as hard to crack, shouldn't I know what I'm agreeing to?" Anger flashed across Victor's face, then was quickly suppressed. Alina came with certain expectations. When those weren't met, she left. "I won't apologize for who I am, Amelia. I've never pretended to be anything else." "And who are you exactly?" "Because I'm beginning to think the man who wrote those letters isn't the same man standing before me now." Victor's expression softened slightly. "I'm the same man. Perhaps it's easier for me to express myself in writing than in person." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration. "I'm not good with words, Amelia, never have been, but I meant what I wrote. I'll provide for you, protect you, treat you with respect. I can promise that much." Amelia studied him, seeing beyond the gruff exterior to the uncertainty beneath. "That's a start," she said finally. "But a marriage needs more than provision and protection to succeed." "I know that," he said quietly. "I'm trying." The sincerity in his voice touched her. "Then I'll try too," she promised. The day before the wedding, Amelia found herself alone in the house. Victor and most of the ranch hands had ridden out at dawn to move cattle to a new pasture. Rosa had gone to town with Felipe for supplies, leaving Amelia to her own devices. She decided to bake bread, finding comfort in the familiar routine of mixing flour, salt, and yeast. As she kneaded the dough, she reflected on the past days and the man she would marry tomorrow. Despite his reserved nature, she'd begun to see glimpses of the man from the letters: his fairness with the ranch hands, his gentleness with animals, his quiet consideration in ensuring her comfort. Lost in thought, she didn't hear the approaching riders until they were in the yard. Looking out the window, she saw 3 rough-looking men dismounting. They were strangers, not ranch hands, and something about their manner put her on alert. The knock on the door was more of a pound. Amelia wiped her hands on her apron, hesitating. There was a rifle mounted above the fireplace, but she'd never fired a gun in her life. "Hello, anybody home?" called a voice. Taking a deep breath, Amelia opened the door partway. "Can I help you?" 3 men stood on the porch, unshaven, dusty from the trail, with hard eyes that assessed her in ways that made her skin crawl. "Well, ain't you a pretty one?" said the tallest, a lanky man with a scar running down one cheek. "You must be Armstrong's new woman." Words got around. "Mr. Armstrong isn't here right now," Amelia said, keeping her voice steady. "But he's expected back soon with his men." The man grinned, revealing tobacco-stained teeth. "That's so. Well, we won't stay long then. Just need some supplies. Our camp ran short." "I'm sorry, but I can't help you." "You'll need to go to town." "Now that ain't neighborly," said another man, shorter but broader, with a cruel twist to his mouth. "Armstrong wouldn't want you turning away folks in need, would he?" "You can wait for him to return if you'd like to discuss it with him," Amelia suggested, beginning to close the door. The first man's boot shot out, blocking the door. "Now hold on, pretty lady. We ain't finished talking." Fear spiked through Amelia, but she refused to show it. "Remove your foot from my door, sir." "Or what?" He leaned closer. "You're all alone out here. We just want some food, maybe some whiskey. Armstrong can afford it." "Step away from the lady," came a commanding voice from behind them. The men whirled to find Jackson Blackfeather sitting on his horse, rifle aimed steadily at them. 2 other ranch hands flanked him, similarly armed. "This ain't your concern, half-breed," spat the scarred man. Jackson's expression didn't change, but his finger moved to the trigger. I won't say it again. A tense moment passed before the men backed down. We're just leaving, the leader muttered. No need for trouble. Mount up and ride, Jackson ordered, and don't come back to Lazia land. The men complied, throwing dark glances at Amelia as they departed. Once they were gone, Jackson dismounted and approached the porch. Are you all right, Miss Hawkins? He asked, concern evident in his usually stoic face. Yes, thanks to you, Amelia replied, her hands trembling now that the danger had passed. Who were they? Drifters. Probably the same ones who have been rustling cattle in the area. Jackson's eyes narrowed as he watched the men disappear over a ridge. I don't like that they came to the house. I'll send someone to fetch Victor and the others. There's no need to interrupt their work, Amelia protested. I'm fine, truly. Jackson gave her a long look. Victor would want to know. An hour later, hoofbeats announced Victor's return. He dismounted before his horse fully stopped, striding toward the house with fury etched on his features. Amelia met him on the porch. Are you hurt? He demanded, his eyes scanning her for injury. I'm fine, she assured him. Jackson arrived before anything happened. Victor's hands clenched at his sides, his injured arm seemingly forgotten in his anger. Jackson told me what happened. Those men did nothing but frighten me a little, Amelia interrupted. Please, it's over now. Victor seemed to struggle for control. It's not over. Men like that, coming to my home, threatening he broke off, taking a deep breath. This can't happen again, not ever. Something shifted in Amelia's chest at the raw emotion in his voice. This wasn't just about his property being threatened, he was concerned for her. I was scared, she admitted quietly, but I'm all right now, you're here. Something flickered in Victor's eyes. Without warning, he stepped forward and pulled her into an embrace with his good arm. Amelia stiffened in surprise, then relaxed against him, feeling the rapid beat of his heart. I shouldn't have left you alone, he murmured against her hair. You couldn't have known, she replied, her voice muffled against his chest. And I wasn't alone for long. Victor pulled back slightly, looking down at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. For a moment, she thought he might kiss her. Instead, he released her, stepping back as if suddenly aware of their proximity. I'll have men watching the house at all times until those drifters are caught, he said, his tone businesslike once more. And I'll teach you to shoot. Every woman on a ranch should know how to handle a rifle. Amelia nodded, still feeling the lingering warmth of his embrace. I'd like that. That evening at supper, Victor was more talkative than usual, as if the day's events had broken through some barrier between them. He told her about the ranch's beginnings, the challenges he'd faced, his plans for expansion. Why did you decide to settle here? Amelia asked. Of all places, Victor looked out the window at the gathering dusk. First time I saw this valley, I knew. There's something about this land, the way the mountains cradle it, the creek running through, the way the light hits it at sunset. His voice softened. It felt like home before I ever built a structure on it. It is beautiful, Amelia agreed, watching the golden light of sunset spill across the valley. Worth fighting for, Victor said, meeting her eyes. Worth protecting. In that moment, Amelia understood something fundamental about the man she would marry tomorrow. His ranch wasn't just property or livelihood, it was his heart, his purpose, and he had invited her to share it. I'll help you protect it, she promised. Something warm flickered in Victor's eyes. I believe you will. Sunday dawned clear and bright. Amelia stood before the small mirror in her room, adjusting the cream-colored dress she'd brought from Boston. It was simple but well-made, with lace at the collar and cuffs, the last dress her mother had sewn for her. A soft knock at the door preceded Rosa's entrance. The older woman carried a small bouquet of wildflowers tied with a blue ribbon. For you, señorita, she said, smiling. I picked them this morning, blue for happiness, yellow for new beginning. They're beautiful, Rosa, thank you. Amelia accepted the flowers, touched by the gesture. You look beautiful, Rosa said approvingly. Señor Victor, his heart will stop. I hope not, Amelia laughed nervously. We need him alive for the ceremony. Rosa helped her pin a few flowers in her hair, then declared her ready. Downstairs, the main room had been transformed. The furniture was rearranged to create a small aisle leading to the fireplace, where a gray-haired man in a black suit, Pastor Evans, presumably stood with a Bible in hand. Ranch hands and their families had gathered, dressed in their Sunday best, their faces curious but not unfriendly. And there at the front stood Victor, his injured arm still bound to his chest but otherwise transformed. He'd shaved, his hair was neatly combed, and he wore a dark suit that fit his broad shoulders perfectly. As Amelia descended the stairs, his eyes found hers, widening slightly at the sight of her. With no family to give her away, Amelia walked alone toward her future husband, conscious of every eye upon her. Victor's gaze never left her face as she approached, and when she reached him, he extended his good hand. She placed her trembling fingers in his steady ones. The ceremony was brief but meaningful. They exchanged simple vows to honor, respect, and care for one another. When the pastor pronounced them man and wife, Victor hesitated only a moment before leaning down to brush his lips against hers in a chaste but tender kiss. It was over almost before it began, but Amelia felt the warmth of it spread through her. The celebration that followed was lively. Tables had been set up in the yard, laden with food prepared by Rosa and the ranch cook. There was music. One of the hands played a fiddle, another a harmonica, and even dancing, though Victor couldn't participate with his injured arm. To Amelia's surprise, several townspeople arrived, bearing gifts and seemingly determined to be civil. Margaret Thornton was conspicuously absent, but others, including the Walters from the general store, came to offer congratulations. "You've made quite an impression," Martha Walter told her. Standing up to Margaret and her cronies, not running off after those drifters came calling, "People are starting to think you might be different from the others." "I am different," Amelia said simply, "because I intend to stay." As the afternoon waned, Amelia found herself seated beside her new husband, watching the festivities. Victor's expression was more relaxed than she'd seen it, a hint of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Are you happy, Mrs. Armstrong?" he asked, using her new name for the first time. The sound of it sent a pleasant shiver through her. "Yes," she answered truthfully. "Are you?" Victor considered her question seriously. "I think I could be," he said finally, "with time." It wasn't the passionate declaration a young girl might dream of, but Amelia found she preferred his honesty. "Then we have that in common," she replied. "A hope for happiness with time." Later, when the guests had departed and darkness had fallen, Amelia found herself alone with Victor for the first time as his wife. An awkward tension filled the space between them as they stood in the main room of the house, their house now. "I've moved my things to the master bedroom," Victor said, breaking the silence. "But with my injury, I thought, that is, I don't expect," he stopped, seemingly frustrated with his inability to find the right words. Amelia saved him from his discomfort. "Perhaps we could wait until your arm is healed before sharing a room," she suggested, her cheeks warming. "Until then, I'm happy to remain where I am." Relief flickered across Victor's face. "That would be best, I think. Thank you for understanding." It was a strange way to begin a marriage, Amelia reflected as she prepared for bed in her own room that night, but perhaps it was for the best. They were still virtually strangers, despite being legally bound. Time to know each other, to build trust and comfort, would serve them well. As weeks passed, Amelia settled into life as Mrs. Armstrong. She took over management of the household accounts, reorganized the kitchen with Rosa's blessing, and began learning to ride from Jackson so she could explore the ranch. Victor kept his promise to teach her to shoot, showing surprising patience as she learned to handle the rifle. The drifters who had threatened her were caught trying to rustle cattle from a neighboring ranch. The sheriff from town imprisoned them, and life returned to normal, or what passed for normal in Amelia's new life. Victor's arm healed slowly but steadily. As it did, he became more capable around the ranch and less frustrated by his limitations. With his improving physical condition came a gradual thawing of his reserve. He began to share meals with Amelia rather than eating hurriedly before returning to work. In the evenings, they sometimes sat together on the porch, watching the sunset and talking about their days. One evening, as they sat side by side in rocking chairs, Victor asked, "Are you happy here, Amelia? Truly?" She considered the question, watching the fading light paint the mountains in shades of purple and gold. I am, she said sincerely. It's different from anything I've known, but I feel useful here, needed. Victor nodded, his eyes on the horizon. When I sent for a bride, I thought only of practical matters, a partner to share the work, someone to make this house a home. He paused. I didn't consider that you might need more than that. What do you think I need? Amelia asked softly. Victor turned to look at her, his blue eyes serious in the fading light. Companionship, conversation, perhaps even affection, things I'm not sure I know how to provide. His honesty touched her deeply. You're doing better than you think, she told him. Each day I feel less like a stranger here. And less like a stranger to me, he asked, vulnerability evident in his voice. Yes, Amelia confirmed. Though there's still much I don't know about you. Victor was quiet for a long moment. Ask me anything, he finally said. I'll try to answer. Amelia considered what she most wanted to know. Why did Alina leave? The truth, please, Victor sighed, leaning back in his chair. She expected romance, poetry and flowers and passionate declarations. I'm not built that way, Amelia. Words don't come easily to me, especially those kinds of words. He looked down at his hands. When I couldn't be what she wanted, she decided I didn't care for her at all. Was she right? Amelia asked gently. No, Victor said, meeting her eyes again. I cared. Not in the way she needed, perhaps, but I did care. And do you care for me? Amelia held her breath, waiting for his answer. Victor held her gaze steadily. More each day, he said simply. The admission warmed her more than any flowery declaration could have. I feel the same, she confessed. Something shifted in Victor's expression, surprise, followed by a cautious hope. Without speaking, he reached across the space between them, offering his hand. Amelia placed hers in it, and they sat in companionable silence as darkness fell over the valley. 2 nights later, a violent thunderstorm swept over the ranch. Wind howled around the house, rain lashed the windows, and lightning split the sky in jagged bursts. Unable to sleep, Amelia lit a lamp and tried to read, but the book couldn't hold her attention against the storm's fury. A particularly loud crash of thunder shook the house, followed by the sound of breaking glass somewhere downstairs. Concerned, Amelia wrapped a shawl around her nightgown and went to investigate. She found Victor in the kitchen, cleaning up shards from a window that had been blown in by the wind. He wore only trousers, his chest bare in the lamplight, the splint finally removed from his healing arm. Let me help, Amelia offered, moving to fetch a broom. Victor looked up, seeming to register her presence for the first time. You should be asleep, he said, his voice rough. The storm woke me, she explained, sweeping glass fragments into a pile. Is anything else damaged? Nothing serious. I checked the barn's earlier animals are secure. He straightened, wincing slightly as he flexed his newly freed arm. Go back to bed, Amelia, I'll finish here. But Amelia wasn't ready to return to her empty room and the howling wind. I doubt I'll sleep anyway, she admitted. The storm is too fierce. Victor studied her for a moment, then nodded toward the living room. I was about to build up the fire. Join me if you'd like. They sat before the fireplace, the crackling flames a counterpoint to the storm raging outside. Victor had pulled on a shirt but left it unbuttoned, and Amelia found her eyes drawn to the exposed skin of his chest, the strong column of his throat. Your arm seems better, she observed, needing to break the sudden tension she felt. Almost healed, he confirmed. Doc says I can return to full duties next week. Amelia nodded, unsure what to say next. Since their conversation on the porch, something had shifted between them, an awareness, an anticipation of something yet to unfold. Thunder boomed directly overhead, making Amelia start. Without thinking, Victor reached for her hand, squeezing it reassuringly. Just noise, he said softly. Nothing to fear. But as their eyes met in the firelight, Amelia realized there was something to fear after all the intensity of the feelings growing between them, the vulnerability of wanting someone who might not want you back in the same way. Victor, she began, not knowing what she meant to say. He leaned closer, his eyes dropping to her lips. Amelia, he murmured, her name a question. She answered by closing the distance between them, pressing her lips to his. For a heartbeat, he remained still. Then his hand came up to cup her face as he returned the kiss with unexpected gentleness. It was tentative at first, an exploration, but when Amelia moved closer, Victor's arm slipped around her waist, drawing her against him as the kiss deepened. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Victor rested his forehead against hers, eyes closed as if gathering himself. "I've wanted to do that since the day you arrived," he confessed, his voice low and rough. "Why didn't you?" Amelia asked, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. He caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "I was afraid." "Of what?" "That you'd be disappointed, that I wouldn't be enough." His vulnerability in that moment moved her deeply. "Victor Armstrong," she said firmly, "you are more than enough." Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside, a different kind of storm was brewing, one of awakening passion and deepening connection. When Victor stood and offered his hand, Amelia took it without hesitation, allowing him to lead her upstairs to the master bedroom that would now, finally, be theirs to share. Later, lying in Victor's arms, listening to the steady beat of his heart beneath her ear, Amelia felt a sense of belonging unlike anything she'd ever known. This man, this place, they had become her home in ways she couldn't have imagined when she first stepped off the train in Willow Creek. "What are you thinking?" Victor asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "That sometimes the greatest blessings come in unexpected packages," she replied honestly. He chuckled, the sound rumbling beneath her cheek. Like a taciturn rancher with a broken arm and no gift for pretty words, Amelia raised herself on one elbow to look at him. Exactly like that, Victor's expression grew serious. "I may never be good with words, Amelia, but I want you to know this: you belong here, with me. Whatever anyone in town says, whatever doubts you might have, you're my wife. You bear my name now, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of you bearing it." Tears pricked Amelia's eyes at the sincerity in his voice. "Those words were pretty enough for me," she whispered before kissing him again. The town of Willow Creek was gathered for the Harvest Festival, the first major social event since Amelia and Victor's wedding 3 months earlier. Trestle tables lined the town square, laden with food. Lanterns hung from ropes strung between buildings, casting a warm glow as dusk approached. A band played lively tunes, and couples danced on a wooden platform erected for the occasion. Amelia smoothed her new dress, a rich blue calico she'd ordered from the catalog at Walter's store, and adjusted her hat. Beside her, Victor looked handsome in a clean shirt and vest, his hair neatly combed, his face freshly shaved. His arm had healed completely, allowing him to return to full ranch duties and, to Amelia's delight, to swing her around the kitchen in impromptu dances when Rosa wasn't looking. "Ready?" Victor asked, offering his arm. Amelia took it, feeling a flutter of nervousness. This would be her first major appearance in town as Mrs. Armstrong. The whispers had died down somewhat over the past months, but she knew many still regarded her with suspicion or curiosity. "As ready as I'll ever be," she replied with a smile. They made their way through the crowd, stopping to greet neighbors and ranchers from the surrounding area. Amelia was pleased to note that many greeted her warmly, asking about the ranch and her adjustment to Montana life. Walter waved them over to his stall, where Martha was serving apple cider. "Mrs. Armstrong," he called cheerfully, "come try this cider. Rosa's apples make the best brew in the county." As they sipped the spiced cider, Amelia spotted Margaret Thornton and her friends watching from across the square, their expressions sour. Victor followed her gaze and frowned. "Ignore them," he advised. "They're not worth your attention." "I know," Amelia agreed. "But sometimes I wish they'd just accept me. It's been months and still they look at me like I'm an interloper." Victor's expression darkened. "Their acceptance doesn't matter. You're my wife. You belong here as much as anyone." Before Amelia could respond, a commotion near the dance platform caught their attention. Raised voices carried across the square, and people moved aside to reveal Margaret Thornton arguing with a young woman Amelia didn't recognize. "You have no right to be here," Margaret was saying, her voice shrill. "This is a respectable gathering." The young woman, pretty, with auburn hair and a modest dress that had seen better days, lifted her chin defiantly. "I have every right to be here, Mrs. Thornton. I paid for my booth like everyone else." "Selling those ridiculous drawings," Margaret scoffed. "We all know how you really make your living," A murmur ran through the crowd. Victor tensed beside Amelia. "That's Sarah Reynolds, Doc Reynolds' niece," he explained quietly. "She's an artist, just moved here from Denver to live with her uncle after some trouble back east. Margaret and her friends have been spreading rumors." Without thinking, Amelia strode toward the confrontation, Victor a half step behind her. "Is there a problem here?" Amelia asked, positioning herself beside the young woman. Margaret's eyes narrowed. "This doesn't concern you, Mrs. Armstrong." "I think it does," Amelia replied calmly. "This is a community celebration, and Miss Reynolds is part of our community." "You would defend her," Margaret sneered. "Birds of a feather, I suppose. One mail-order bride and one fallen woman." A hush fell over the nearby crowd. Victor stepped forward, his expression thunderous, but Amelia placed a restraining hand on his arm. "Mrs. Thornton," Amelia said, her voice clear and carrying, "I came to Willow Creek to build a life with my husband. Miss Reynolds came to start anew with family. Neither of us deserves your judgment or your cruelty." She looked around at the watching townspeople. "I had hoped that by now I might be accepted here, but I see that some minds are too small to accommodate change or growth." Margaret's face flushed with anger. "How dare you speak to me that way? Do you know who my husband is?" "I know exactly who your husband is," Amelia replied evenly. "And I know who my husband is too." She looked up at Victor, drawing strength from his steady presence. "He's the man who gave me his name, his home, and his heart, and that's worth more than all the small-minded gossip in Montana territory." A slow clap started somewhere in the crowd, then spread. To Amelia's surprise, several people were nodding in agreement, including Walter and Martha. Even the sheriff, a taciturn man Amelia had met only briefly, tipped his hat to her. Margaret looked around, realizing she'd lost her audience. With a huff, she turned on her heel and marched away, her friends scurrying after her. "Thank you," Sarah Reynolds said softly. "You didn't need to do that." "Yes, I did," Amelia replied. "No one should face that kind of treatment alone." As the crowd dispersed and the band resumed playing, Victor placed his hand at the small of Amelia's back. "That was quite a speech, Mrs. Armstrong." "I meant every word," she told him. His eyes were warm with pride and something deeper. "I know you did. And for what it's worth, I think you just won over half the town." Looking around, Amelia realized he might be right. People were smiling at her, nodding respectfully. The wall of suspicion that had surrounded her since her arrival seemed to have developed significant cracks. "Dance with me?" Victor asked, nodding toward the platform where couples were gathering for a waltz. Amelia smiled, taking his offered hand. "With pleasure, Mr. Armstrong." As they moved together on the dance floor, Victor's arms strong around her waist, Amelia felt a sense of rightness wash over her. This was where she belonged in this town, on Victor's ranch in his arms. "I love you," Victor said suddenly, the words low and meant only for her. Amelia's step faltered in surprise. It was the first time he'd said those words, though she'd felt them in his actions, in the way he looked at her, in how he'd defended her to the town. "I love you too," she replied, her heart full to bursting. Victor pulled her closer, propriety forgotten as he bent to brush his lips against hers, right there on the dance floor for all of Willow Creek to see. A few gasps sounded nearby, but Amelia didn't care. Let them talk. Let them see that Victor Armstrong loved his mail-order bride, and she loved him right back. Spring came to Montana with a rush of wildflowers and new life. The Lazy thrived under Victor and Amelia's joint management, he handling the cattle and ranch operations. She overseeing the household and garden, both making decisions together about expansions and improvements. Amelia stood on the porch one bright May morning, watching as Victor worked with a young horse in the corral. His movements were confident, patient, his voice a steady murmur as he gained the animal's trust. In the year since her arrival, Victor had changed in subtle but meaningful ways. He smiled more easily, spoke more freely, especially with her. The taciturn rancher remained in his dealings with strangers, but with Amelia and their growing circle of friends, he had learned to open his heart. Willow Creek had changed too. Margaret Thornton and her closest allies maintained their distance, but most townspeople had accepted Amelia as one of their own. She taught reading at the small school one afternoon a week, served on the church committee with Martha Walter, and had formed a genuine friendship with Sarah Reynolds, whose artistic talents had finally earned her respect in the community. As she watched her husband, Amelia's hand drifted to her abdomen, where the first signs of their child had begun to show. She hadn't told Victor yet, wanting to be certain before sharing the news that would change their lives once more. That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, a ritual they'd maintained since those early days of tentative conversation, Amelia decided it was time. "Victor," she began, her voice soft in the gathering dusk, "I have something to tell you." He turned to look at her, those blue eyes still capable of making her heart skip a beat. "What is it?" "In about 6 months, the Lazia will have a new resident," she smiled, watching comprehension dawn on his face. "A very small one." For a moment, Victor sat perfectly still, as if afraid any movement might shatter the moment. Then he was on his knees before her chair, his hands gentle on her waist, his expression one of wonder. "A baby," he whispered, as if saying it too loudly might make it untrue. "Our baby." Amelia nodded, tears of joy spilling down her cheeks. "Our baby." Victor pressed his face against her still flat abdomen, his shoulders shaking with emotion. When he looked up, his eyes shone with unshed tears. "I never thought," he began, then stopped, overcome. "I never dared hope for so much happiness." Amelia cupped his face in her hands. "When I stepped off that train a year ago, scared and alone, I never imagined I'd find everything I ever wanted in a place I'd never been, with a man I'd never met." Victor rose, pulling her to her feet and into his arms. "When I sent for a bride, I thought I was just getting a wife," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Instead, I got you my partner, my heart, the mother of my child." As the sun sank behind the mountains, casting the valley in the golden light that had first called to Victor years ago, he kissed his wife with all the love he'd learned to express. Their future stretched before them, bright with promise, a family growing on land that had called them both home. In Willow Creek, people still sometimes told the story of the mail-order bride who had been mocked upon her arrival, and the rancher who had simply said, "She's got my name now." But with time, the story changed. It became a tale of love that grew from unlikely beginnings, of a woman who found her place in a strange land, of a man who found his voice through loving her. And on the Lazia Ranch, Victor and Amelia Armstrong built their legacy together, season by season, child by child, day by day, proving that sometimes the greatest journeys are those that lead us home to the hearts waiting to love us.